So, welcome to this talk. As I mentioned, my name is Dr. Dominique Padurano, Ph.D., and I'm the founder and president of Crimson Coaching, which provides academic tutoring, test prep, and college consulting to students worldwide. A lot of times people ask me, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? And as you can see from the little dome of the building where I lived during my undergraduate years, as well as the color of the mat of the diploma behind me, that's the color crimson, which is the color of Harvard, where I went as an undergrad. And what I do is coach students to reach their highest potential, whether that's on the SAT, in school subjects like AP World History or Algebra, or finishing their Common App. Oops. I created this talk because I feel that lots of students get very overwhelmed by the Common App, and that feeling of being overwhelmed introduces a lot of stress into the home in the summer between junior and senior year and during that whole senior year fall. And so by breaking the Common App down and telling you what's in it and hopefully giving you a head start into that process, I hope to basically have your this really exciting time of life be a little less stressful. So I will be speaking for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. This talk is being pre-recorded, so I realize that normally you would be able to ask me questions if this were a live webinar, but I will be sharing my email with you at the end of the talk. So please feel free to email any questions that you do have about tonight's talk. And I just want, before we continue, I would just like to thank you for watching. Thank the librarian Laura Panter for inviting me to give this talk, and to Sachem Public Library for sponsoring the talk. So as a historian, the doctor in Dr. P comes from a PhD in history. I like to share with students and families my sources that I'm using in any talk I give. So some of them are personal. Certainly, not only did I apply to Harvard and get accepted, but I also go to reunions. And during those reunions, I've been at talks with the current undergraduate director of admissions, William Fitzsimmons, where he has given my class tips and tricks of what their children might do in order to apply to a school like Harvard. And so some of them will make their way into tonight's talk. As a teacher of history and social studies for more than 10 years, starting at a school here on the lower right, Great Neck North High School, way back in 1997, and finishing up in 2014 at Scarsdale High School in Westchester, here up in the middle. In between, I got that PhD, so that's why that doesn't correspond to a total of 10 years. The bulk of my professional experience was teaching full-time was at Horace Mann School, a independent day school in Riverdale, which is in New York City. So during these 10 years of teaching, I really got a firsthand look at the teenage brain. And I understand that teenagers often get overwhelmed with things that they find intimidating. And so again, that's where a lot of my tips and tricks come from. But then, of course, the bulk of the time I have been, for the past 9 years, I have been the head coach of Crimson Coaching, where I've helped students apply via the Common App and get accepted to schools like Princeton, Stanford, my own alma mater, Harvard. And so that experience will also inform tonight's talk. And then finally, I like to keep abreast of the latest research in the field. One book that I highly recommend that every family read is Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions by New York Times journalist Jeffrey Salingo. And Ron Lieber, his colleague, a personal finance columnist at the Times, his book, The Price You Pay for College. Both of these are really a wealth of information, some of which finds its way into tonight's talk, but of course, it's way more than I could put into tonight's talk. So please go to your public library and check out a copy of those books. So when you make a profile on the Common App, and any student above the age of 13 can do this. And I recommend, starting as a freshman. Why not? Because you can add to it as the years go on. And we'll talk about what ports over on August 1st and what does not port over later on. But you'll see up at top, there's a variety of tabs. The first tab is your dashboard, and the dashboard lists the colleges that you are applying to. So very simple. The next tab, the My Colleges tab, also lists the colleges, but it's also where you will go to complete college-specific tasks, such as a supplemental essay, and we'll talk about those in a sec. So you're probably going to interact with your My Colleges tab quite a bit if you already know what colleges you're applying to. Your Common App tab, that's the information that you could start filling in now. Even as a 13-year-old, you could fill in your name, your social security number, your date of birth, where you live, your parents' education, all of that stuff that really won't change. That's on that Common App tab. And by the way, don't underestimate the amount of time that it takes to fill these things out. That's why I always recommend starting around July 1st after the junior year as the latest when you should really start filling out that information in the Common App tab. And then finally, there's the college search. And this is where you will start to search for colleges. And then after you find one, so say you'd like to apply to St. Joseph's College in Philadelphia, you search up St. Joe's, you might find St. Joseph's in Patchogue, New York, as well as in Philadelphia. You click on the one for Philadelphia that says add, and then you'll see that in your dashboard and in your My Colleges tab. Okay. There's also a financial aid tab. I'm not going to be speaking about that tonight because I'm actually not a financial aid expert. But of course, if you need financial aid to attend school, I recommend checking out that tab on your own. So let's dig into what's in the Common App tab. Well, it's your profile, family, education, testing, and activities. So again, these are things that are going to all of the colleges that you'll be applying to. So my first do is compose your answers to the activities and other sections that have limits on the character count or the word count in a Word doc or a Google Doc so that you can keep track and see all at once how many words and characters you have, okay? Because when you're working in that little box on the Common App, it's really difficult to edit in there, and you only know you've reached the limit of the characters once it won't take any more typing, okay? So do it all first in a separate document, and then once you've got everything perfect, just copy and paste it into your Common App. Do not underestimate how tedious this section is and how long it will take you to complete. And I will also say that, by the way, it's very easy to make mistakes in the Common App. I don't think that it's a super user-friendly site. I don't want to throw shade at Common App, but I don't think it's incredibly user-friendly. And so the more time you have to work with it, the less stressed out you'll be, and the less likely I think that you will make a mistake. So the big kind of Common App task that most students dread is writing the personal statement, or whenever it says writing in the Common App, generally they will have to write the personal statement. So let's take a look at that. I have a whole separate talk on what you should do to write a great college application essay, and you could feel free to check out that whole talk on youtube.com/Crimson Coaching and just search up how to write a great college application essay. This is like the Reader's Digest version of that talk. Okay, so if you want more details, go there. But a step-by-step guide is first, you want to think about, what's my personal brand? And a personal brand is just one or two adjectives that really describes best the you that you would like the college to know. I get that we all have 17 or more adjectives that can describe us, but we might not want the college admissions officer to know all of them. Like, I once had a student use the word goofy. She was kind of goofy, which was charming, but goofy, I don't really know if goofy, we want that to come across most, because she was also really smart and caring, which I think were better adjectives for her. Okay, so think about which you'd like to present, and then brainstorm all of the prompts that the Common App gives you, numbers 1 through 6. 7 is sort of a write your own prompt, and I'll talk about that later. But choose the 2 brainstorming ideas that best showcase your personal brand. And just remember while you're brainstorming that no experience is too small or too mundane. It really matters less what you write than how you write it. Okay. And I don't really recommend reading a ton of polished, published personal statements online before you start, because inevitably what happens is you're going to get super intimidated because their essay sounds so good and my essay is nowhere near that good, and then you paralyze yourself into not being able to write at all. But just maybe read 1 or 2, and just to get the flavor of what good essays sound like, and then write 2 drafts of about 1,000 words each, and make sure that you're answering just 1 question in each draft. I sometimes have students who come to me, late in the game. They don't start working with me right away, but they'll come to me and they'll say, well, this is kind of a 5 and kind of a 3. And my answer is, it can't be kind of one thing and kind of another. It's got to respond. You need to check off which essay you're replying to, which question or prompt you're replying to. So pick one. If you like 3 and 5, write 1 draft for 3 and 1 draft for 5. Okay. Then once, in that draft, by the way, you want to include lots of sensory description, maybe even some dialogue. You want to remember what your English teacher has told you to show, don't tell. In reality, the greatest essays show and tell. However, it's my experience as a writing coach that most people start off telling. I'm a really hard worker. Well, show me you're a really hard worker. How can you do that? I once had a student who got accepted to Princeton, wrote an essay called The Fifth Defenseman, in which he wrote about how he was always on the bench of his ice hockey team, and he worked really hard, getting up at 5:30 every morning to practice shots in his driveway. And the sensory detail that stays with me even to this day, almost 10 years later, is he actually tasted the sweat, and he talked about the salty sweat. That shows how hard he worked to get onto that team. Okay, he didn't have to say, I worked really hard. And then once you write those two drafts, choose a draft that better illustrates your personal brand more strongly, and also that you enjoyed writing more. If it's going to be a great essay, you are going to revise it at least 5, maybe 10 times. And so you're going to be with this for a while. Choose the one that you liked writing more, or at least perhaps the one that you hated writing least. But don't delete the other one. Keep that one for supplemental essays. When you go into revisions, start revising at the paragraph level first, okay? Make sure that each paragraph does a different job and that it advances the story from beginning through middle to end. You're going to finish by editing at the sentence level, okay? Now's the time, once your paragraphs are all set, then you're going to make your sentences sound good. This is also the time at which you want to start narrowing the word count down to 650. The reason why I tell students who work with me privately to write a first draft of 1,000 words is because it's much easier to take out words than it is to put back on after the fact. So I once had a student could only produce about 300 words, and that's fine. I'll work with anybody, but it's much more difficult because then I was having to get him to write sentences during the session, and so it took much longer for us to advance through the 650. Definitely read your essay out loud or have somebody else read it out loud to you. You will definitely hear things that need to be changed, and you want to make sure that this is in your own voice. Don't use a thesaurus because you think it's going to make you sound smarter. Use words that you usually use. Teachers like me and college admissions officers can tell when you're looking up, that $10 word, and that doesn't sound like something that a 17-year-old would write. Again, I recommend starting this process early. When I work with students privately, I usually recommend that we start around the first week of July and that we leave about 1 week in between each session so that by November 1st, September 1st, they basically have their polished personal statement done, and then they can work on their supplemental essays in September and, first half of October, and be ready to apply early by that usually November 1st or October 15th deadline. If you're doing this on your own, I definitely recommend that you put time in your calendar to revise. If you do not put it in, it will not get done because it is difficult to do. And the best essays are not ones that are written overnight. The best essays are ones that get revised, I would say 5 to 10 times at least. So I don't recommend showing this essay to too many people too early, because when you have a first draft, you've just poured your heart out onto the page, okay? You can feel very, very vulnerable at that point, okay? And it can really mess with your confidence if somebody comes in and say, oh, that's horrible. So don't show it to people too many people too early, okay? This especially goes parents. I'm sorry for parents. Parents often have a lot riding on where students go to school. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way it goes and for lots of parents. And so parents, students, your child wants to please you, even though they might not act like it. They want you to be proud of them. And if you say the wrong thing about a draft that's too early in its infancy, that can really shut a student down. I would especially say that if you're working with a coach, somebody like me, there's no need for the parent to get involved in the creative process. If you want to be helpful or do things, you could certainly maybe help your child stick to a schedule, help them with filling out the Common App tab. But the essay, I don't recommend parents, start especially too early. The other people I have to say I wouldn't rely too heavily on are English teachers who don't really know a lot about the process, and guidance counselors who aren't writers. Oftentimes, guidance counselors actually don't even have the time to help you through the essay process. And English teachers could be great writers and could teach you how to write a great analytical essay, but I've had several students come to me after working in English class, either in 11th grade or 12th grade, on the college essay. And the best case scenario was one student came to me with a decent draft that was way too long, that we then had to kind of shape and cut down to fit a question, because the English teacher told them write about anything, and that's not what you have to do. You have to respond to one of the questions. The worst case scenario was a student who had worked for 6 weeks in AP English at Brooklyn Tech, which is a really good public school in the city. And he came to me on like October 20th wanting to apply early, November 1st. And he said, we have a friend who does interviewing for Brown University. And he said, I can't apply with this essay, that it's not at all right. And I said, I'm sorry, I do agree. Look, we did work together over the next 10 days. We completely started from scratch. He had a very serviceable essay that got him into University of Michigan. But he didn't get into Brown, which was the school he really wanted to go to. And I often wonder, had he come to me in August when he started in AP English, could he have potentially written that much better of a draft? So I would say, make sure if you're getting help from a professional that they've done this before and that they know the kind of essays that help students get into college. So let me just move this around here. So in the My Colleges tab, the questions are all different, and your supplemental essay questions, those extra essays that certain colleges ask that range anywhere from 25 words to another 650 word essay, they might be hiding there in the My Colleges tab. Okay. Also in the My Colleges tab, you're going to find recommenders and FERPA. FERPA means you're signing a release, and recommenders is where you're going to assign recommenders for each school. Okay. You're going to complete the high school information first in the education section. Okay. Because they need to know what high school you're at, and then you're going to assign the recommenders in the My Colleges tab. Speaking of recommenders, we're heading into the end of the school year right now. Today is April 5th, 2023. I recommend that juniors in the next 1 to 2 months ask 2 academic teachers, will you write me a strong letter of recommendation before you assign them in the My Colleges tab? The reason why is, so look, I was a high school teacher for 10 years. I taught juniors for many of those years. I got asked by, dozens of juniors to write letters of recommendations. I always did, except in one case, when I had a student who asked me, who I really didn't think I could write a strong letter for, and I told her, hon, if you have somebody else to ask, I recommend you asking them. Not every teacher, though, feels comfortable having that conversation. and they may just write you a mediocre letter of recommendation. I would much rather know to my face now so that I could go out and get a stellar letter of recommendation than not have the teacher tell me. So don't just ask, will you write me a letter of recommendation? Ask, will you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Okay. And you can get an optional one from an employer, a coach, advisor, club, director of a play. If you are going to an academic program, you should have from 2 academic teachers, meaning from one of the 4 major subjects or foreign language. If you're going to a music or art college, of course, you want to get music or art teachers. And by the way, I should have mentioned this. I'm going to just go back for a second. I would ask them before you leave for summer break. The reason why is some schools put a cap on the number of letters that junior teachers can write, because some teachers, if they only teach juniors, they could get asked to write 50 letters of recommendation. That's, crazy. The teachers aren't compensated for this, any extra. And some of them will, even if there's no cap, they'll take on a bunch, but they might prefer to write them over the summer rather than having to start the new school year, which is always labor intensive, and write 50 letters of recommendation. Okay. And P.S., I didn't mention this on the slide, but give your recommenders a handwritten thank you note after you're all done applying. Teachers live for that stuff. And again, they're not being compensated for that time that they're spending. And it's just a nice way to say thank you, saying thank you with a thank you note. So a note about supplemental essays. They are difficult to find, and the questions are often hidden in various parts of the My Colleges tab, and they're not always called the same thing. Sometimes they're called questions, sometimes they're called writing. So I always recommend to my private students, click on every single thing in the Common App. Read very carefully before you decide that school has no supplemental questions, because I will tell you, even though I give my students this advice, someone always comes to me on October 30th saying, Dr. P, I just found a college supplement for so-and-so. I didn't see it before. Can we have a meeting? Okay. So make sure you scour that application before saying that that school has none. Okay. Don't reinvent the wheel. I recommend that my students sort of create a template for common supplemental essay questions, such as why University X? Why do you want to major in what you want to major? Why? What can you do? Since 2020, there's often been a diversity question. How will you contribute to diversity on campus? You also want to make sure that once you get that template, that you're able to kind of take 50 words here, add 100 words there, because different schools have different word limits for these supplemental questions. I always recommend, you don't have to go right to the limit, but if there's a 350 word essay and you're only giving them 150, I don't know, that doesn't really look great. Okay. Same thing with the personal essay. It's 650 words on the Common App. I wouldn't give them less than 550. That does, worry me a little bit. So I do recommend, going close to the limit. The Common App also has 2 optional questions. There's a 650 word tell us anything essay, and then a 250 word COVID-19 essay. I recommend that my students write both of them, even if everything you have to say is positive. Okay. If you're not sure what to write in the Tell Us Anything essay, you could pick another prompt, a very different prompt from the personal statement, and just write that. Okay. Try not to repeat something that's elsewhere in your application, though. About COVID-19, I had a student who enjoyed being home because she was bullied, and she used that time really productively to tutor online Spanish-speaking students who had recently immigrated into her district. So she didn't think, it doesn't have to be a trauma that you write about. It could be something where you talk about turning COVID-19 into lemonade, helping others. Another way that you might want to circumvent word limits in the entire application, including in the activity section, is by including a URL to a LinkedIn profile. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, then definitely we should talk about, and you should check out my How to Use Social Media Wisely talk on YouTube. So I like to counsel my students to use every opportunity that a college gives you to tell them something new about yourself. Don't keep on talking about the same thing. Also remember that not every college is on the Common App. So for example, University of California system has its own portal. Instead of one 650-word essay, you're writing 4 350-word personal interest questions. That's a lot. And you really need to kind of plan ahead if you're applying to schools that are not on the Common App. So that's really all I have for you today. If you would like to learn more, please feel free to sign up for my monthly newsletter. There's a black banner that runs across the homepage at crimsoncoaching.com. It says click here to receive Desk to Nest newsletter. I don't spam you. I don't sell your email to anybody else. It does come just once a month, and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is really geared for parents. It gives you a very short article and then a list of all my free talks coming up for the month, as well as some interesting links to news about college admissions and adolescent education in the news now. I always appreciate a like, of course, on Facebook at Crimson Coaching, but I especially appreciate a subscribe on my YouTube channel, especially if you feel like this talk was helpful to you. You could like this talk right now there, and if you go to my channel, which is youtube.com /Crimson Coaching, subscribe, because I'm putting up new talks all the time. In fact, I just realized I don't think I recorded my using social media wisely during the admissions process talk. So maybe that's a new one that I will post myself. So once you subscribe, you get notified when new essays pop up, new videos pop up, sorry. So obviously, I can't take questions today because it's a pre-recorded video, but please feel free to email me at info@crimsoncoaching.com if you do have any questions about this talk or any of the other talks on my YouTube channel. You could visit crimsoncoaching.com. I've got a ton of free resources on the resources page, as well as a blog that comes out once or twice a month that has lots of articles pertaining to things like the SAT, the digital SAT, and the college admissions process. If you're interested in private coaching, I do most of my coaching through Zoom because I have students all across the country and the world, although I am located in Bohemia, New York, so I do have some availability on Long Island. And then finally, I do half-hour free consultations. Both parent and child needs to be present. You can find a link for that on the contact page at crimsoncoaching.com. You can schedule and get on my schedule directly there. You don't even have to email me. Although if you'd like to do it via email, I'll do that too. So once again, thank you so much for watching this talk. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you to Sachem Public Library for sponsoring tonight's talk and Laura Panter for inviting me. I hope you have a great night.